everyone. We're here with David Wilson, and he is an artist that has been doing a Burning Man comic for as long as I can remember. And his stickers are used officially by the organization, and his artwork can be seen at Center Camp and kind of all across the land if you look closely. We incorporate his art at Campfire Cove. And in our future project, we'll be incorporating his art as well because it's amazing and it tells a great story of Burning Man.
Thank you, Campfire Cove, for having me over for this wonderful conversation. I have brought my coffee along so we can have a little coffee talk.
So do you want to give everyone a little background on your comic and what it's about, including what I've always wanted to know is when you started this project or this land that you've created?
When I first went to Burning Man, my very first year there in 1999, I went knowing absolutely nothing about the Burning Man Festival. I was told about it like 3 days before we left, and I brought $100 cash that I paid for a ticket at the gate with. I had no idea what I was getting myself into. Went in a Winnebago with 12 other people. And I was out there, and I was a fire safety for a fire conclave called Magma Box, and I just had this moment walking around at night, one night by myself, just kind of marveling at the city and how amazing it was and all the people's creativity and how unbelievable it was and how hard it would be to describe it to anyone. And I thought, you know, this would make a really cool comic. Like this would work really well as a comic or a graphic novel. Like you could, if you had like a basic narrative, you could just show the entire city in a way that would potentially really communicate the unusual or the magic air or atmosphere that's there in a way that I think would be really, really effective without getting into the whole thing of that it's a festival and all the rules of the festival, like ignoring all of that. And let's just pretend this is a mythical city in the desert that appears for 1 week every year. Like that's our premise. We'll just start there and we won't really explain anything beyond that. Just throw you right into the middle of the action and you have to figure out what's going on with all of these people who are real people, but they're depicted as their semi-fictionalized personas. So that was kind of how it started, was in 99. When I got home after the burn in 1999, I wrote like a 25-page script or story of what I thought like could be the overall story arc of the entire week. And I still have that. It's really, really bad. It's pretty bad. I was 25 or 26 at the time. It's very kind of spiritual, you know? And that kind of got it started. And then over the next few years, I kept going and the idea just didn't go away. And it started developing, and then drawings came after that, and bit by bit it started developing into what would later become Drinkwater the webcomic, which has now been going for 7 years. Burning Man ran a syndicated run of it on their site, and yeah, now it's this unwieldy beast that I try to keep up with on a regular basis.
Well, and then that led me to my next question is like, where do these characters come from? And if they're inspired by everything. And so you answered like, these are real people. But then how do you pull a real person? How do you pull that character out of them?
They are all real people to an extent. There are certain characters that are amalgams of different people. This is something that actually my friend Jaihuda Jones, this was her idea, because I said I was talking with Jaihuda, who you guys know, and I said I really don't want to get into relationship drama in the story. I don't want to talk about who's dating who. I really want to skip all of that. Like maybe there will be 1 or 2 little romances that might develop over the course of the narrative, but I really don't want to touch any of that, like, because it's all, you know, this person dated that person, then they dated that person. It's like, who cares, you're right? So she suggested you could have characters that are amalgams of a couple of people. Depending on what scene you're in, this character might be played by this person or that person. And so you can kind of dodge specifics of their actual lives by making the characters a little vague. And so there are quite a few characters that are like that are kind of these amalgam characters. There are a few that are 100% real people. Like Munkus is a 100% real person. Every scene with Munkus is an actual scene. Those are things that he would actually say. Like, I really try to get his personality kind of dialed in. And the other one is Eros. Eros is like somebody who is very difficult to describe. He's a very unique individual. And so, yeah, he is kind of, he stands alone as his own character. But there are quite a few that are a different person depending on what scene they're in. Because when you're pulling stories, like basically every story in the comic is a true story that happened over the course of 13 years that I've gone to Burning Man. But of course, not every person went every year. We weren't camped in the same place every year. And so it's trying to make all 13 years into 1 week. Which means there are stories where there is a character who might be very important to the story, but it's the only time they appear in the entire saga. So rather than just having this one-shot character, I can fold them into another character and kind of pretend that they're actually this other character in this other scene, and kind of like group these people together based on what the scene is. Like the most obvious use of this is the character Zoetrope, who's basically the lead woman in the story. She's kind of the alpha lady, but she's definitely scene to scene. She's based on different people, and she's based on basically these kind of alpha personality women that I've known who, depending on what year, were kind of in charge of what was going on, because she has that. She's like the boss, but she's a very understated boss. She's actually the kind of the brains behind the operation, but it's not really a show off. She's like the kind of cool, steady center, whereas all these other characters are really kind of chaotic or flamboyant. Like she's this real steady kind of center to the whole thing. She hasn't quite gotten her, I feel like as we go forward, different characters will kind of take the focus for different days and have different story arcs. And so far she's been, she hasn't really taken center stage, but that's coming up. She's like one of the most important characters in the whole thing eventually. Okay, I'm rambling a little bit. Should I get into
great. I like your rambles. Great. They're so full of information, and you have so much content, and you've been doing this for a long time, so yeah.
Yeah, I think that's part of it, is that I've been, drawing it in earnest for 7 years, but the idea has been brewing for 21 years. Like it was really brewing in the background the whole time, as you guys probably know, as you saw me kind of tinkering with it. And I felt like for a long time it was going to be just this time wasting vortex that was never going to go anywhere, but it just started taking up more and more real estate in my head. And I was like, I just have to get this thing down, like for good or for bad, and see how it looks. Let's look at some images, because some of this stuff we're talking about, I have images to go along with it. So should we go into some slides?
Yeah, I'd love that.
All right, so let's look at a little bit of the history here first. So this is just starting off with something big. This is the mural I did in 2016. I've done murals 4 or 5 years. Well, I guess 4 years officially, but 5 or 6 years unofficially. So I showed up in 1999. This is me in 1999, showing up at Burning Man for the first time. Again, I only had 3 or 4 days notice. I had no idea what it was, but I had been working with Magmavox for about a year then, as a performer and mostly as the fire safety. I didn't really do fire at the time. I didn't know much about it, but they were my friends, and I just thought they were amazing performers. And so I would go around with them as a fire safety. And I made this Neptune mask for a performance that we had at the Seattle Aquarium. This was in Seattle in Pioneer Square at the time.
Oh, well, I didn't know that.
Yeah, so the mask was made for this show at the Seattle Aquarium, where they were going to do a fire show. And the group was small. It was Eros, Serafina, Mason, Kimba, and Corey, who was kind of the main manager type, like a fire safety manager guy. And me, I was kind of the tag along at the time, because I didn't really perform much. But I went to a thrift shop in Pioneer Square, and I bought a $5 motorcycle helmet and went home and turned it into this Neptune mask and used it for that Seattle Aquarium show. And then 4 days later, they're like, hey, we're going to Burning Man, pack your stuff. And I was like, all I have is this Neptune mask, so I took it with me. And showed up, had no idea what I was doing. But there was something about being there in 1999. Like I said, I had this kind of moment of being dressed as Neptune, King of the Sea, in the desert, working as a fire safety. Like something about that just resonated so hard. I was like, I just feel like I stumbled into kind of this perfect situation. Ended up in the Great Circle as a fire safety for Magmavox. They got into the Great Circle for the Fire Conclave. We didn't have any plan for being in the Fire Conclave before we went. We actually went and performed for Crimson Rose at the Cauldron. And she said, if you perform every night at sunset at the Cauldron, I'll let you be in the Fire Conclave for Saturday. And so we did that. Every night we would go to the Cauldron and we'd do these big fire shows. And then when Saturday came around, she gave us laminates and we went in. And I was wearing the mask. I was doing the whole thing. I went to the burn. And the first thing that happened was I got pulled out of the crowd to actually pull the rope to raise the man before he burned, because that was how it used to be on Saturday, is they would lay him down on the desert and load him up with pyro. And then the first part of the ceremony was like 20 people would grab this rope and raise him up. And that was how the ceremony began. I think they did that till maybe 2001 was the first year they had a pedestal, So before that, there was this kind of history of raising the man. So I worked as fire safety, pulled the rope, raised the man. It was this really amazing experience, and went home. And like I said, as soon as I got home from this in Seattle, I typed up this script. Like it's about 25 pages, and it basically told the whole story of the week, but skipped everything having to do with the festival. Never talked about Burning Man itself, really dealt with it as though it was a mythical city in the desert that just appeared once a week, or for 1 week a year, rather. And that was about the size of it. Then I went back the next year with Magmavox and brought the costume back again, gave it a little upgrade. This time his eyes actually lit up. He had lights wired into the eyes, so his eyes lit up. I made some terrible costumes. I really was really bad at costuming in the beginning. Like, look at this, wearing like some kind of like burnable green fabric that's not even sewn into a shirt. It's literally just wrapped around my body, like with safety pins, because I can't sew. And so this was my first year spinning fire as Neptune. And so I actually got to perform in 2000 with Magmavox in the Great Circle. And then we went back in 2001 and I brought him back again. This is 2001. And this year I kind of upped it. This is the third year with Magmavox. I went for the full green body paint and made this giant flaming trident, which was really poorly constructed and ended up melting during the show. Again, there was a learning curve in all of this stuff. Like it took me a while to kind of figure it out. But look, his eyes still lit up. He had white whiskers that year. That was like old man Neptune. And you can see my little laminate down there. And this is 2001, I think, is when the character really kind of snapped into focus. Like that was when I really got it. That's when the show kind of came together. I was much more confident as a performer. The first 2 years were very awkward, but I felt like in this third year, I really got a sense of what the character was. And it was funny. Even at the time, people are like, don't you have another costume? You just like, this is 3 years in a row, you brought the same costume. I'm like, I know, it's the only costume I have. But there's something so poetic about being the king of the sea in the desert. Like that just, to me, I couldn't think of anything that was better than that. It just was funny. Like it felt good when I was out there. And then we started doing the whole thing of like, drink water, like Neptune tells you to drink water. Like this whole campaign of rehydration, the jokes just started piling on each other. Like it started becoming really fun. So I kept with it. So this is the third year. And then of course, the fourth year in 2002, they announced the theme would be the floating world. And I had decided I was going to retire the character. And then they said it was the floating world. And I was like, well, I have to bring him back now. This is the ocean world. Like, of course, even though it's the fourth year, this is the one this is all building up to, right? Like, got to go for the floating world. So
that's a great theme.
It's a good theme. It really was a good theme.
Great, yeah.
So 2002, here I am in 2002, returned. You can see his whiskers never got replaced, so they're all singed off. This is what happened Like that's why I replace the whiskers every year, because during the fire shows they melt and get singed and it's kind of part of the fun, I think. But I showed up at Burning Man in 2002, 4th year as Neptune, and went to check in at Fire Conclave Convergence and was told that I was the only member of Magmavox to show up. You have an entire pie slice of the Great Circle reserved for you on Burn Night, and you're the only person here.
Wow.
And so Crimson told me on Monday.
Figure it out, buddy.
Figure it out, exactly. So Crimson told me on Monday, she said, you have 2 options. You can join another group. You're welcome to do that. If you know another group and you want to just hop in with them, you're welcome to do that. Or you've got 4 days, you could build a new group. And so I decided to build a new group. And so me and Munkus went from Fire Jam to Fire Jam all week long, recruiting people, like looking at the shows, seeing people we thought were good, and we go up to them and be like, hey, do you have a group for Saturday? And if they didn't, we would invite them in. And we ended up with this real hodgepodge group of like misfits that we found over the course of the week, and that ended up being the show. And so that was 2002, where I kind of found myself in charge of this group. And yeah, that kind of started the whole thing. And so that was where Garnish really started, was that group that we formed in 2002. Even though we didn't come up with the name Garnish until after the burn, that was the group. And that's the group that kind of is the root of what is still going today, because that's how Portland got involved. Like we found like some Portland people found Fire Ninja, right? We found Fire Ninja just out at a Fire Jam. And this guy, we called him Mr. Chucks. He was our Flaming Nunchucks guy. He was also from Portland. And we had our Chicago team. We brought an entire Chicago group. It was a 5-person troupe. They joined up. Corey knew them. And that was Danyan and Nasu. And a lot of those people are still going too. And so then we continue. So this is 2002. Let me just go through these real quick. 2003, 2004, 2005, 2006, 2007, 2008. Love this one. It's kind of a pixely photo.
I remember performing on that.
Isn't that fun?
Yeah, that was a great time we had.
Then 2008, this was my year I retired. So I was in charge of the group from 2002 to 2008. And that was my 10th year. And the conclave got canceled, and it was a 16-hour dust storm. And I was like, you know what? I think I'm out. I think 10 years is good. I'm going to stop while I'm ahead. So then I returned in 2011 and 2013 and 2016 was the last time I was there. And I have a couple of shots here from the 2016 show where I did fire painting. That was really fun. That was a really nerve-wracking show because we really didn't know if it was going to work. Like I was worried that the wind was going to pick up the canvas and fly this flaming canvas off into the crowd. You know, that's why we put this big weight on the bottom. But that was a really fun show in 2016. And so that was the last time I was there. So 13 years as Neptune. Yeah, that's a lot of years. So yeah, so what started out is just, you know, being lazy and bringing the same costume back year after year. Then after a while it became a tradition. It became well, now that I've done it 4 years, maybe I should see how many years I can do it. Like, you know, especially since it had been 4 years in the Great Circle, it almost seemed like some kind of a tradition or something that, you know, let's just go for it. But it was funny, starting in 2003 is when Crimson really started looking at me and she's like, are you really going to keep doing this? Like the Floating World was last year. Are we really, we're just going to keep, and I was like, well, but 2003 is Beyond Belief, which is all about gods and deities. And Neptune is a deity. Like, you guys have to just stop making the theme so perfect for the costume. Like, you know. And then, of course, it kept kind of rolling. And this is stuff you guys might remember, like 2004 is when we decided to run for mayor. That's when the Neptune for Mayor campaign started. And we did Neptune for Mayor, I think it was 2004, 5, 6, 7, 8, like maybe 4 or 5 years there. And, you know, didn't do it real seriously every year. I think there were a couple where I really... Well, there were never any real... elections.
Voting happening?
Right, there was never any real votes. And I kept suggesting a vote as like an art piece. Like maybe there could be a citywide election as an art piece and we could vote on stuff. And I think you guys remember this, like, you know, I don't know, best art card or best place to get a cocktail, whatever. You have like this election with all these different things, and you put the mayor on there, and it becomes kind of a funny thing. But the truth was, since there were never any elections, there were multiple people running for mayor, and at the end of the week, you know, some people believed you won and some people didn't. And so there was just this growing contingent of people who actually thought I had won, even though there was no election. And so we just kept the joke going year after year. And yeah, so the whole thing kind of started snowballing, right? So that brings us to Garnish, right? So just a few slides here, but I want to talk a little bit about Garnish. So Garnish was the group that I formed in 2002 when I just wandered around the playa looking for misfits. And here's our group of misfits. There's Michael Greenwood, a very young Michael Greenwood. There's Munkus right up here, looking real threatening. There's Fire Ninja, look at him, a little young guy down here, and Monique. And this is Nasu, who very sadly passed away a couple years after this. But this was our crew. Actually, we're missing maybe 4 or 5 from this photo, but this was the group we put together that first week. And this is us on burn night, right before the burn's about to happen. Every group that year was given one of these big platforms to play with. And we borrowed a trampoline from some random camp and dragged it out into the circle. So we had this trampoline with us.
Platforms and trampolines?
We had this trampoline next to our platform in the circle that we borrowed from a neighbor's camp. And so we were like jumping on fire on the trampoline up onto the platform. Like it was out of control. It was totally ridiculous. This was 2002, that first year. And you know, some of these people didn't last, but you know, Michael Greenwood, obviously, I had known him. He had been to Magmabox, so he was like the one Magmabox person who made it and kind of stuck with me. And Munkus, this was his second year. I think he had been fire safety the year before.
So that's the Munkus character in your book that never changes. Like
Right.
He looks like the character in your comics.
Yes, that's definitely him. Munkus is somebody, I've known him since we were teenagers. He and I went to school together, and he's from South Philly. And we had traveled around the country together. Like we had kind of a long history. And so when he came to Burning Man, for me, that was a real, that really kind of made things have more depth. I don't know if you guys experience this, when you have like a really good close friend who actually comes for the first time and you see it through their eyes, and suddenly everything is like more profound and more meaningful, and kind of ties it into the tapestry of your life a little bit. And that's partly what having him come out there. And then the fact that he ended up learning fire spinning and becoming part of the group just made it so much better. So this was our little misfit band in 2002. This, I don't even know. This is maybe 2003 or 4.
Yeah, it's 4. Look, there's Mason,
oh yeah,
and Brianna.
You can see the dome. You're right. It is 2004. There's that, not dome, but there's like a sphere, I think, that the man was standing on. Right. There's Banyan, and there's me, and there's Mason. The Valkyries. I think this was 2 of the Valkyrie girls. There's Brianna and Charisse. And this is maybe the next year, maybe this is 2005. I'm not even sure at this point. This stuff all starts blending together. But Mason was from Magmabox, and Michael Greenwood was from Magmabox. And Kimba came back from Magmabox. Starchild came back from Magmabox. Basically, once we set up Garnish, all of these Magmabox people started coming back, because when the Magmabox people would come back, they'd be like, hey, do you still have a spot in the conclave? And I'd be like, yeah, come on in. And so it ended up, a lot of the Magmabox people ended up coming back. Look, I think Aimee, is that you back there?
Yeah, that's me.
Yeah.
Cherry.
And Reese, and there's Jamie.
Mason on the end in his white
Yeah.
panic suit.
I love that outfit.
I think this is Stardust. I think that's Elijah. This was a girl from Portland whose name I'm spacing on.
Ashley, I think. Ashley or
Maybe.
Christina.
Just throwing girl names out there.
Yeah, well, we're friends. It's Ashley and Christina, but I can't tell which one.
And Starchild, she was from Magmavox. She ended up coming back with the Stilt Circus. She's now the head of Stilt Circus. And so later she came back with all the Stilters. Let's see, I have a few more. Wait. Oops. This one's fun, you know.
Yeah.
I mean, it's a kind of an epic.
Yeah.
So this, I think, is probably the 2006, I'm betting, maybe.
Yeah.
Because we have the Stilters now. Here's John Padone, who is sadly no longer with us.
Yeah.
And there's Chris, and there's Germany, and there's Munkus, and the Valkyries, and there's
Yeah.
Aimee. The Valkyries were, just for those who don't know, they were a 3-woman performance troupe who had traveled the world, the Valkyries.
Montreal, right?
From Montreal, that's right. They were kind of, they're still going. They work with, Cirque du Soleil and kind of do things like that. They're great performers.
Yeah.
They were with us for a bunch
Wonderful
of years.
ladies.
Yeah.
And this, I don't remember. This is 2007. This is our camp in 2007.
Our advanced infrastructure.
This is when our camp really started like taking shape and actually having some real construction.
Incorporating wooden screws.
Yeah.
What's that?
We started using wooden screws.
What I
We did
don't
a
have a
master
photo of
about a decade.
is in 2006, do you guys remember when we wanted to build a stage and we didn't have enough wood for it? So we
Yep.
took Jamie's golf cart out to the Belgian Waffle and just stole 2x4s from the Belgian Waffle, and they didn't even notice.
Yeah, they had a lot of extra wood. We did not ruin their art project.
No.
For
They
those
had,
who
like,
don't know what the Belgian waffle is, we didn't.
when they burned the Belgian Waffle, there were still like 10 pallets of 2x4s off
Right.
on the side. Like we just took a bunch of it was very funny actually, because we did it at like noon. We're like loading these 8-foot 2x4s onto a golf cart right next to the Belgian Waffle and then just driving off.
We need a stage. We're gonna make a stage.
And then we went back for 2 more trips and nobody said anything. So anyway, so that was Garnish. And Garnish, of course, is still going. This is a photo from 2011, I think. One of the years I came back and joined the group. And so they're still going. And they do good shows. They do a good thing. And they've definitely gotten a lot bigger. When I ran the group, I think we maxed out at maybe 30 people tops at our biggest year. And now it's been up like 50 people at this point. So they turned into a very large group. So that's Garnish, the history of Garnish there in just a few moments. I think this was really my favorite era. It was like around the 2006, 2007. I felt like that's when everything really clicked together. We had a good camp, and then we also had a great show, but the group was still kind of small, so we could kind of—
More fire and less rules.
Yeah.
Yeah.
We had a lot of fire, but we were kind of a small group, so we could improvise and still put on like a really good show. And I felt like that was kind of my peak, was right around that 2006, 2007 time. And then it kind of moved on to the next era, which is all great, time to move on. So now I have some images here, to get away from the fire for a minute, of some of my murals. So this is a photo from 2005. I didn't start out as a muralist. I started out as kind of a renegade Black Rock City street artist who would just go around and put up posters in the middle of the night, until I got in real trouble for doing that with Crimson Rose, who made me repaint the man's pavilion and threatened to throw me out of the city forever. This was the year before I got caught and threatened to throw. So 2005, we went around and just postered the whole city and nobody complained. And we were like, this is great. We can just do this all the time now. We don't have to reserve space. And then it was 2006 when we tried to do it again that we got totally busted and I had to repaint the whole man's pavilion. So this is a nice photo from 2005 of our Drinkwater posters on the man's pavilion. There's Aimee with one. I think this is 2006, maybe, I'm betting.
2006.
This is one, again, just a renegade poster that we put up at Center Camp. And so this is 2007. This was the first Center Camp mural that I did, where we showed up before the gates opened to set up Camp Sucky Fucky. And I did this mural, this poster paste mural at Center Camp. So this was 2007. That was the
So
first.
would that be the first year you were legally allowed to?
Exactly. This was 2006, basically. They threatened to throw me out of the city. They threatened to like disband our camp and like kick everybody out of Conclave. Like they were not messing around. They're like,
This is our man. We spent time on it. Get your art off of our man. Like they were, yeah.
Yeah, she dragged me out of the tent at like 6:30 in the morning. It was pretty brutal. Um,
And then 2007 said, okay, you're going to continue doing this and we're not going to kick you out. So why don't we just give you space to do this?
this was her suggestion. Crimson was like, you can just sign up for space at center camp. Like, there are places you can legally mural. Like, why are you doing this way? And I was like, oh, I didn't realize because I didn't read the instruction book.
So I like how you incorporate like older art installations and like you have drawings of art from all different time periods in here. And how do you pick?
So yeah, that's a good point, because with 13 years of story, like I said, it all has to happen within a single week, which means that all art installations and all art cars coexist at the same time in the city of Drinkwater. In Drinkwater, it's only 1 week. Like, and everything that's ever happened to Burning Man happens during that week, basically. Like, at least that's how I'm writing the story now. There's a lot of art installations that I've kind of picked up on, or obviously ones that I really have personal attachment to, like La Contessa. La Contessa, I actually watched them build that from scratch on the playa in 2002. They actually had a whole wood shop set up right in the middle of the Esplanade, right by our camp, and they built this Spanish galleon, like, to scale, this beautiful boat, and then drove it around for the next 4 years until it was mysteriously burned to the ground. And so we had lots of adventures riding on that, and so I have a lot of personal connection to that car. But then, like, there's Draka the Dragon down here. Dr. Megavolt, who I've always really loved. He was actually one of the first acts I saw at Burning Man that really made me just love the city. So yeah, and since then, like, there were a few like that I kind of latched onto early on, like La Contessa and Draka the Dragon. But since then, in the webcomic, I've made it a point to try to include as many different art cars and art installations as I can. Like, that's kind of part of the mission, is while I'm telling the story, I want to try to get as much of the city into the picture as possible. Obviously, because of the theme of the book, I've kind of slanted it towards the fishes and the sharks and things like that, because they just kind of fit into the story a little bit better. But the goal is to try to include everyone eventually. Like, that's kind of the long-term goal. And so, yeah, there's the bone tree. I've always loved the bone tree. He makes a big appearance sometimes. And so this was still, what year was 2007? And so at this point, I had been thinking about the comic for 8 years, but I really hadn't drawn very much. I had like a couple pages. This is basically all the pages I had. I think we're right here. That's like what I had drawn. I was like, I'll make a mural, just put all these drawings together. But I had written, I think, 2 or 3 more drafts of this script by then. Like, I had multiple text documents that are all terrible. Like, but they were me trying to find, what is the tone? Like, what is the tone of this thing? What is the rhythm of it? How do these characters interact? How do we present the city without touching on the festival side of it at all? Like, I just wanted to ignore all of that and really just make it this kind of surreal city in the desert. Yeah, and so that was kind of the goal at that point. And so this putting together this mural, I think, was one of the first big pushes to get, to kind of assemble all the drawn artwork together. Like, to say, okay, what is the comic? How do we get the comic together? And so this was 2007. This was 2008. This is at Center Camp, this little Vote Neptune for Mayor, Black Rock City mural. And this I learned a lesson here, that it's very difficult to actually paint on that knotty plywood that they use at the Center Camp. Like, I did it this one time and I was like, I'm never doing it again. It was such a nightmare because it's so splintered and, like, you know, it's really
repellent, like,
yeah, it doesn't take the paint well. You can't get any detail. And I did it this one time and thought it was kind of funny, and that was it. And so, this is another one from Center Camp. This one is a personal favorite of mine because I took this photo in 2011, but I'm pretty sure this poster went up in 2006. This is one of the posters we put up in 2006, one of the Renegade ones that we put up, that reappeared at Center Camp years later. Like, they just kept using the piece of wall, and somebody else came in and painted all the colors and, like, colored it in and everything.
oh, nice.
But this was originally put up in 2006, and it just kept returning to Center Camp year after year, which I thought was kind of cool. And of course, this was 2016. This was the first big one, like when I really spent a lot of time on this, because at this point I had started the webcomic. And so I wanted to do a mural that kind of tied into the webcomic. Not so much as an advertisement, because I've always thought of the webcomic as a public service announcement. Like, you know, I think of it in terms of, I don't know if you've ever read The Hitchhiker's Guide to the Galaxy. But one of the main things about The Hitchhiker's Guide to the Galaxy, it's this book that interstellar travelers carry around. And on the cover of it, it says, "Don't panic," because that's the most important thing that you have to remember. And so I kind of, this is my take on it.
Yeah.
Is that if you're lost in the desert, if you're on like, you know, enough hallucinogens to kill a horse and you're lost in the middle of the desert, the only thing you have to remember is that you have to drink water. And so, like, no matter how lost you get, this is the one thing for you to remember. It's all you have to remember is drink water and you will get through it. And so that became kind of it's a public service announcement, but it's also kind of a guide.
It's a life guide.
It's a friendly piece of advice.
Yes.
Great.
And so I kind of like, and plus it's the whole, you know, then it comes from Neptune for mayor. And so it's Neptune's kind of rallying cry, because of course he's trying to rehydrate the playa to bring back Lake La Hontan. So yeah, so this one was 2016. I will, I think one little detail on this, I put this up by myself at 2 o'clock in the morning, between like 2 and 4 o'clock in the morning, with only a paint can to stand on. Like I had to like stand on 2 paint cans to get up to the top, and the wind was blowing and everything like this. And it's put up like wallpaper, like these are vertical strips printed out on like cheap printer paper.
That's very impressive.
Yeah, it matches perfectly. You would never know.
Oh, thanks. Yeah, it was kind of a disaster going up. But at this stage, so 2016, this is now 3 years into the comic. And so you can see the characters are kind of developed on either side. Yeah, and so it had solidified as a comic at this point. And I think actually Burning Man had started their syndicated run at this point. And so it was really kind of in full swing. And then I came back in 2017, or actually I didn't make it back in 2017, but I made this giant mural. I had to cancel at the last minute, but the Philly crew went and put it up for me, which was really nice. And so this one is kind of, obviously kind of an inverse spin on the previous year. Although I always like this one because it's shaped like a cassette. I always thought of this as the cassette single murals.
Yeah.
And see, these are the 2 little reels, and this is the cassette single mural. But I thought they did a really good job with that. And then I have something I pulled off of Instagram that I thought was funny.
Cute.
So yeah, and then I ended with these. This is 2018. These were the panels that Aimee, that you made. A couple of these images. So I haven't been back since 2016, but the crew at Camp Sucky Fucky has used the images from the comic to create some of their own murals in camp, which I think is really cool.
That was a beautiful gift for you and Aimee to provide. It was amazing.
They really came out nice. And I was just looking at this last night. It looks like, are these markings on the map, or are these
Yeah, they tried, but the pens dried out like after like a day. So
yeah, so those are hanging pens there, so people could mark.
Oh, I see.
So those are those like on strings.
All right, it was a good effort.
Yeah,
I didn't know how that would work out, but
I should have maybe got Crayola or something like that. Something a little hardier for the sun.
It was still pretty fun.
Like chalk, I think works pretty well.
Yeah, chalk, that makes sense.
Although it kind of makes some moop and dust, but
yeah.
But you can see these are just the scenes. A lot of these are just scenes cut straight from the comic. Okay, and then a couple of the stickers. This one was made in 2016 to be currency at the Philly Burners casino at the man base. Philly Burners that year, they made the 420 Union, which basically was a labor union during the daytime and then became an illegal gambling casino at night. All the tables flipped over and they had like games underneath. And so we printed up these stickers to be the currency for the casino games.
We might have to do a reprint of your currency.
Yeah.
We might be in need of some currency in the future.
Oh, go for it. Yeah. Or we can make a new one. But yeah, these are all like public use. Like, so anybody can use these things. This one I always liked. This was my 2003. There's an oil painting of Ganesh in Black Rock City, which was actually a dream I had in Black Rock City. And that's the other thing about the comic that I haven't touched on, is that there's a lot of dream passages or scenes from dreams, and they are real dreams that I had in connection with going to Burning Man or being at Burning Man. Like this one where I actually went and kind of I'm walking up the promenade and the whole city is there and Ganesh is like 5 stories tall, like sitting at the man base, was a kind of a dream that I had while I was out there. And so I painted this in 2002, I think. 2001, 2002.
Is he a benevolent Ganesh?
He is. He's a very nice Ganesh. Yeah, he's kind of like a, snarky burner. But overall, like his intentions are good.
How did he lose a tusk?
Well, that's part of Ganesh's story. Ganesh is always pictured with one tusk missing. I think he lost it in a fight with Shiva, if I'm remembering correctly.
Yeah.
My mythological stories. But so he is basically Ganesh, but I put a little Burning Man on his head, and he's got like weird genitalia for his third eye and for his trunk. Like, he's a little weird. Right. There's a little Dr. Megavolt over here. There's the little rat. There's Eros. There's the little UFO. And this was this weird kind of slug shape that I never really finished. Like, I was in the middle of painting to this when I went to Burning Man in 2003. And I was walking across the playa with Luis, and this giant slug art card drove right past us. And we were both like, oh my God, that's the weird fucking slug shape that I put in my painting. Like, so it's
like, I can't paint over that.
Right. And actually, Luis Sanchez, the wonderful artist Luis Sanchez, who we all know, was the one who looked at this painting in 2002, and he said, that's not Ganesh, that's Garnish.
Wow.
Nice.
And he said he just looked at the painting. He's like, I don't know why. He's like, when I look at that, I just think Garnish.
Yeah.
And I was like, that's kind of funny. And I think I told Munkus like on the phone later that week, and he was like, that is kind of funny. We're like, do you think that would actually be a good name for the group? So the name came from Luis saying that Ganesh looked like Garnish. And I remember Munkus said he really liked the name Garnish because it made it sound like we were the flaming sprig of parsley on the entree of the man's plate. Like if the Great Circle was a entree plate, like Garnish was the little flaming sprig of parsley on the side.
Great.
So this guy in the center, he's the protagonist of your comic.
He's the reader, I call him.
He's the reader.
He's the reader. And the reader is who you meet in the very first scene, who's basically me, but not strictly me, because he has a very kind of interesting character role. He did get a name at the end of book 1. He's now Dave Javu. He got his playa name at the end of book 1. That was one of the little developments, because he didn't have a name for the beginning. He's basically the first year virgin newbie who knows nothing, who stumbled into
name, no costume.
No costume, exactly. He's got no costume. He's got no gear. He's always fucked up, like not in a good way. Like he's the guy who's always like dehydrated, or he took too much of something, or he's like puking in a porta potty. Like he's always confused and fucked up. And he's kind of he's the yin and yang to Neptune. Neptune is the very experienced burner, the head of a theme camp and the head of a conclave, and he's kind of got a whole mission and a whole thing going on. And he's kind of the flip side of him. You know, you have the real experienced guy, and then you have the total novice who doesn't know anything, who's stumbling through. And so that's kind of how those two characters play off of each other. But he's not really designed to be me per se. Like he's more supposed to be just an everyman. Like he's just anybody. He's any like rube who didn't like have a lot of friends out there and is like stumbling around and is like thinking, what the hell did I get myself into? And so that's his role. And so yeah, that's kind of him. yeah, and okay, so a couple other stickers. 2005, this one was fun.
Mm-hmm.
I think Crimson, I sent Crimson this little painting. I think she still has that. This one's 2006 maybe, or is that 5 also? I can't remember. And More Fire, Less Rules! Probably the most popular sticker I've ever been a part of making, even though it was Aimee's idea to make the sticker and it was Brianna's catchphrase. But we got a lot of mileage out of that sticker, that's for sure.
Yeah, for sure. It's just it's a PSA. Remember that. Keep that in mind, people.
This was another one that Crimson like really rattled my cage. She's like, "Did you have to make that sticker? Like really? Like that's." All the DPW guys latched onto it. They were like, "Yeah, fuck yeah, More Fire, Less Rules!" And she was like, "Oh, God damn it!"
I remember getting that sticker and it went with me forever. Do you have copies of these old stickers still?
Some. I don't have any of these. Well,
Yeah.
no, I have one of these that's like stuck on a paint box somewhere,
Right.
but I don't have one in reality. I do. I can show my little collection here. So here's 2003. One of my favorites. This was one of my favorites. 2003, 2005, 2006, 2016, 2017. This one, I don't even know when this one's from. 2004, maybe?
Mm.
Little drink water one.
Cute.
We got some of these. I really liked this little sticker, this little garnish sticker. I thought was one of my favorites. It's really simple, but I really liked it. And this one, the Burning Man made of the Larry Harvey.
Perfect.
Yeah, so that's the end of the history. Hopefully that makes sense. This is just a photo I really liked from 2005, I think. This is Nathan's little remote control monster. You remember our friend Nathan used to bring this little remote control monster and run all over the playa? I think we were out for a parade that day. So that's a little bit of history. Hopefully that kind of makes sense.
Oh, it makes complete sense. So I have a couple questions too.
Okay.
Like, what are the challenges that you find? It seems like everything flows so harmoniously, but are there any challenges, and how do you overcome them?
I think there have been a lot of challenges. I think that I've never, even though I've been drawing comics since I was a kid, this is definitely the biggest project I've ever taken on. It's somewhere around 500 or 600 pages at this point. It took me a while to really get into the feel of the writing. Like one thing that I find is very tricky is writing dialogue so that it sounds natural, so that it doesn't sound stiff or made up, but to actually make dialogue that sounds like somebody could really be saying it. And that's something I didn't have a lot of experience with writing. And so that's something that's taken a long time to kind of get a handle on. And the other thing is the comic itself, and we can kind of move into comic mode now. The comic itself, I've been basically just drawing in my free time this whole time. Like I've not really been able to focus on this as kind of a full-time pursuit. So, sometimes I can hit the deadlines and sometimes I don't. It really kind of depends on everything else that's going on. But yeah, the writing is the tricky part. Like I have the story in mind. Like I have an outline for the story. I know how the story proceeds, but it's really writing things in a way so that it flows very naturally and smoothly. And that's something that I feel like I've gotten better at as I've gone along. But that was pretty rough in the beginning. Just doing the text and the actual dialogue and the writing.
Oh, that makes sense. Now, so you said that you kind of have things mapped out in your mind, it sounds like.
Yes.
Is there ever an end point to these characters or to the story, or does it just continue on and on until you get, is there some sort of outline?
Yes, there is an outline. There's definitely an outline. The outline, the way it's organized, and this is something that kind of settled into place really early in the process. Like back in 2000 or 2001, I had this idea that it could be a story in 7 parts, and each part is one day of the week. And so the whole story is the entire week. And so, then it would be kind of divided up into 7 books, and each book would be a full day that would start, you know, when you wake up and end when you go to bed, basically a day on the playa. And they usually, or so far, I guess what I've been kind of sticking to is that each book starts with a dream and ends with a dream. So they're kind of framed with a dream on either side. So you don't really, it's not always obvious that it's a dream, but I think it kind of becomes obvious. And then the whole story would be the 7-day arc. So we started our story on Tuesday. And the idea is that would go Tuesday, Wednesday, Thursday, Friday, Saturday, Sunday. And then the final book is Monday. And the final book is the epilogue and prologue together in one book, where half of that final book will be setting up the city, and the second half of the book will be tearing down the city. It's kind of the Monday before and the Monday after. And so that one is kind of, it very much has this kind of epilogue quality to it. Although it's amazing how much, like, I already have a lot of that planned out, although at this rate, it's going to take me 20 years to get to that.
So what book are you on now?
I'm on book 2. I'm in the middle of Wednesday right now. I'm in the middle. I did all of Tuesday. So Tuesday was...
Got Tuesday over with.
Tuesday was the first 7 chapters. And basically each book would be 7 chapters. There'd be 49 chapters total. And I'm halfway through book 2. I'm in the middle of Wednesday. And this is actually a planned resting point that I kind of planned out, like that I knew that there was going to be a big dust storm in the middle of Wednesday, and that was going to be a place where I could kind of pause. And so I've really been aiming towards this middle of Wednesday dust storm for like years now. Like I knew it was coming. I was aiming for it because it's the first real rest, like where everything kind of shuts down for a second. Here, I'll show you. Actually, let's kind of get through that. So, okay, so I have some of that coming up. Let's touch on this. So I put some of these images in here so we can kind of talk about some of the characters, right?
Wow.
So here's Neptune and Muncus. They obviously, for so far, they've been kind of, their relationship has been kind of in the forefront of the story. And I always think of them as like I see a lot of parallels towards like characters from movies. You know, they could almost be like from Superbad, you know, Jonah Hill and the other guy, you know, kind of the tall, skinny one and the rounder one, or like a Laurel and Hardy kind of thing. So their relationship is kind of at the center of the whole thing. Then here's Zoetrope and Misanthrope, and that's the two. Well, Zoetrope is really the boss. She's kind of the you know, like I said, the power behind the scenes, or the brains of the operation. And then Misanthrope is her second, she's basically her bestie. And so the two of them are kind of a team. And then we have the Stilters always in the background. There's Eros and Stumbelina and Mongo and Pardone. So here's a better character drawing. So here's Neptune, here's Muncus, there's Stumbelina and Eros, Zoetrope, Misanthrope. There's Sparkle Pony, who's a very popular character. Sparkle Pony is like she's definitely an amalgam. She's an amalgam of all the Sparkle Ponies I've ever known. She is like the raunchiest, most drug-infested, like she is the total train wreck of the group. Who has just...
So good doing it, right?
What's that?
She looks so good doing it.
She looks so good doing it, exactly. And she's always has this like sparkling, optimistic personality. But yet it's just like disaster after disaster after like she's just a train wreck in real time, happening all the time. And she has a boyfriend named Brony, of course. Her boyfriend is Brony. Although I have a feeling, like I'm part of her story arc, I think, is that she's gonna dump Brony and fall in love with another Sparkle Pony. Not spoilers or anything, but I think that's kind of part of her story arc. And then we got Mongo and Pardone back here. And Pardone is John Padone, who passed away. And so it's been really nice to have him in the story. And I've had
he ran Mystical Misfits for a while, right?
Yeah, John Padone was one of the founders of the Mystical Misfits. And he was a good friend of mine in LA. Just a really cool guy who passed away way too young.
I was telling them a story yesterday about how we saw him at Lightning in a Bottle, and he had a tent full of kittens.
Was I there for that?
Yes. He was coming to my tent, and he had like a litter, like some big kittens in there, in his tent, and I was like, oh my gosh. Anyways, he's a very nice guy.
He was just a super, just the kindest, like funniest person. It was really a shame. It's funny now that this has been going so long, there's a couple of characters who have passed on who still are in the comic. Jai Huda is another one. Jai Huda passed away 2 years ago now. But the year after she passed, she was in almost every episode of the comic. I don't know if anyone knew that I was doing that, but like she immediately, for that whole mud wrestling sequence that went on for like a year and a half, like she was the character that was right in the middle of that.
Oh, great.
And it's just a way of, kind of keeping them alive, I guess.
Right.
So here is where, now this is kind of says, these are all from the comic. And so here's where we meet Neptune. We meet him in the dream sequence in the first issue. And, I don't want to give away too much, but I think of this as the older Neptune. This is him looking back. And basically he then presents the book, which is Drink Water, to the guy who's stumbled into his library in a dream. And then the entire series always comes back to this scene of the two of them in a dream, and Neptune is trying to tell him this story through the book, but yet he only speaks fish. And so it's this like funny, like miscommunication going on. But it's all kind of happening in his head. But it's almost like Neptune is the future self coming back to the younger self, almost like trying to let him know what's coming, or to tell this tale. And this is this whole the room, the library with the fire and the chairs and the sofa and the book. That is a recurring dream I had as a child. This is one that kind of wove itself in really early into the whole story, because this was a recurring dream that I had as a kid growing up, that I would go to this underwater city, into this room where this person would try to get me to read this book, and I never could understand what the hell was going on in the book. But I would have these like flash memories of it. So we meet him here, and then this is now where he is in the story. This is the younger Neptune, who is, in his prime, spinning fire, out making trouble. Another little and I don't know if this is really relevant, this is something that's going to come out later, is that Neptune is, how do I want to say this? He's basically like the spawn of a fairy shrimp and a fire salamander. Like he's kind of a hybrid of like one of those little fairy shrimp that lives in the playa with like a fire salamander. And so he really only has a lifespan of like 16 months or so. And so this is something that comes into the tale later, is that like, this is partly why it's only 1 week. And then if way down the road, if there were ever another week, it might potentially be another Neptune, like the next generation could kind of come and be a whole other character. That kind of is like stolen from the Sandman. I don't know if you ever read the Sandman back in the 90s, but that was like the story of Dream, is that he passes and the new Dream takes over. Anyway, that's really good. See, I've spent 20 years
as a father and raising his. I'd like to see him as a father raising his
tadpoles. Yeah,
his tadpole babies. That would be a real arc for him.
It would definitely change his whole arc of development. That's for sure.
Right.
And there's a lot of this kind of like backstory stuff that, since I spent 20 years thinking of it, has really developed, but I don't know that it'll ever really go anywhere. I also think of Neptune not as like a patriarchal inherited title. He's more like the Dalai Lama, where like when Neptune dies, another Neptune is born somewhere in the Sea Kingdom, not necessarily related, but the soul passes to it. So he might be like a crab next time or something like that.
I like this.
This is how I've always kind of thought of it. Is so because I don't like that idea of the inherited like royalty. I've always thought that was kind of gross.
Yeah.
It's more like, and I think that's how the Dalai Lama works. I think I'm using that right, where when the Dalai Lama dies, a baby that's born when he dies is the next Dalai Lama, like somewhere in the world. And so Neptune's kind of the same thing. Somewhere in the Sea Kingdom, the next Neptune rises up. But it's also like he's kind of like Doctor Who, where he kind of remembers his past lives. See, I've spent way too much time thinking about this. Anyway, let's move on to the other characters. So here's Eros. He's one of our main characters. This design is based on a costume that I made for him for that first year in '99. I designed a costume. I forgot, I could have included that drawing, but there's a drawing I made for Eros in 1999. He made the costume based on the drawing, wore it out at Burning Man, and then now his character is based on that costume. So he had these like animal stilts that he made. Like a bird? Yeah, he's like a bird sea monkey character. It's kind of like half bird, half sea monkey. That's something we also used to say about Eros, was that he had bird bones because he's so lightweight and he's like this kind of awesome circus performer. So here we have Eros and his stilt crew. And this song that he sings here, this is a real song that he used to sing. And he actually called me when I posted this, and he was like elated. He's like, I can't believe you remember that song.
Can you sing it for us?
Okay, but you maybe edit it out if it's not good. Okay, it goes, come on, hey there, buddy, how's it going, little buddy? Don't you wanna come on? I think you wanna come on. Don't you wanna? You really wanna? I think you wanna. Do you wanna get high with me? Don't you wanna get high with me? Don't you wanna get high? Don't you? So he would walk around singing this song on stilts. Like it made him happy. Like
yeah.
He would go around just singing this in everyone's face. So Eros, if you guys know Eros, he's a very he's like an aggressively friendly puppy. He just runs up to people and starts nibbling on them like all the time. And so here they do this musical number where they do the song and dance. And there's Eros and Stumbelina and Pardon and Mongo. And Stumbelina is based on my friend Serafina, who was Eros's performance partner for many, many years. And Mongo.
Stilt Circus now. She runs Stilt Circus now.
No, she's in Stilt Circus, but Starchild runs Stilt Circus.
Oh, Serafina.
Yeah, Serafina. Serafina is Stumbelina. Even though I think Starchild has worn this outfit before, this has become kind of her default outfit for the comic. And Mongo is Mondo. You remember Armando, who used to be in the group? So that's him. I think he moved to Asia or something. Anyway, so there's our stilters. And Munkus, who has become, I think, the favorite character. He's the one that most people kind of ask me about because he's, I think, one of the most developed characters, and also he's got a big heart as a person and as a character. Like he's a very warm, fuzzy person. And so here he is in his luchador Mexican wrestling outfit that he brought to do the mud wrestling match in Black Rock City. So here he is entering Netherworld Ranch, ready to take on the mud wrestling tournament. And so that brings me to another, I did in the webcomic, there is the mud wrestling tournament is told as part of the story. It's a story from 2001 that really happened when Munkus and I went to this mud wrestling match at the Netherworld Ranch. When I first, a few more characters here. This is what I wanted to get to. When I first did this is the print edition that was done in 2008. This is my first attempt at doing the comic. It was pretty rough, but it was a Playa gift in 2008. And the first story in that comic is the mud wrestling match. And this is it. This is the first draft of the mud wrestling match. It's 3 pages long. The mud wrestling match in the webcomic is like 65 pages long. It's ridiculously long. This 3-page story just expanded to just the most ridiculous ends. But I tried to kind of this scene is reproduced in the webcomic. I redrew it with the devil with his megaphone.
Was there a real devil?
There was a real devil. So the Netherworld Ranch, they hosted this mud wrestling match, which was basically just a guy with a hose, like pouring it on the ground and everyone rolling around in playa mud. But they had like this lifeguard stand next to the mud wrestling pit, and this guy dressed as the devil sat on top of the mud of the lifeguard thing, and he was supposed to be the judge. He was supposed to be the juror, so he would decide the winner, and he would grant the winner a boon from the devil. And so that was why Munkus wanted to go. He's like, because his whole story arc, and this is something that comes directly from him, was that he had lost his soul to the devil by working from corporate America. But corporate America was the devil that had brought him in and taken his soul and left him a wrecked person on the other side. And so when he got to Black Rock City, he decided he wanted to try to regain his soul. And so he saw this mud wrestling match hosted by the Netherworld Ranch, where Satan would be there and he would grant boons to the winners. And he said, this is a chance for me to win back my soul. I'm going to go there and I'm going to get it back from the devil. And so he did the whole mud wrestling match and he won. He beat everybody. And the devil at the end, rather than giving him the boon, announced that these two hot girls that were sitting with him on the lifeguard stand were the winners, and he just took off. Like, he totally, like, it's totally true story. And Munkus was left standing there, like, covered in mud, like, you gotta be fucking kidding me. What? And then he went and washed off behind a water truck, and that was kind of the end of it. But so, like, this, like, 3-page version, this was the 3-page version of what became a 65-page story in the webcomic, which is part of the reason why it's taken me 7 years to get, you know, a day and a half into this thing. But because of this, because this comic, this edition that was done in 2007, 2008, is the same Drinkwater, but it takes place on Wednesday. So when I started the webcomic on Tuesday, I knew I was aiming for this. I was like, if I get through Tuesday, then I can start retelling, like, basically this and work these stories into the narrative, right? So it's almost like starting with the prequel and coming back up to approach this. So currently what I'm doing is following this little mini comic is the kind of the outline of the current book, if that makes sense.
Yeah,
so we started with the you know, the mud wrestling, and then there's a dust storm, and then the next exciting thing is oh, I think I have it in here. Let's do this. So we get some Flaming Stilt Soccer, which is a game we used to play out in Black Rock City.
This doesn't seem safe.
It was not safe. It was, as Eros used to call it, it was the stupidest game ever invented. It was very unsafe. The ball was basically like two beach towels wrapped around a Nerf ball, wrapped up in baling wire and left to soak in a 5-gallon bucket of kerosene overnight. And so it was this huge, like, sponge of fuel that he would bring out of the bucket, and he'd put it down on the playa, and we'd all be on stilts. And basically,
they were metal stilts, though, right?
No, they were wood stilts. They all were on fire by the end of the game. They were just peg stilts. We would make them ourselves. We would go to the Home Depot and make peg stilts and, like, cut, like, bits of bicycle tire for the grips on the bottom. Right. They were totally handmade and really terrible. Like, in the comic, this is a true part of the story. My stilts were actually, we ran out of straps, so my stilts were duct taped to my legs. Like, we used like 2 rolls of duct tape, and so I had them on for like an entire day. I couldn't take them off.
Wow.
So we would go out and play Flaming Stilt Soccer just out on the Esplanade. And the game was, you would kick the flaming ball at each other, and if you got it in between the other person's stilts, you got a point.
Wow.
Yeah.
So what year did this take place, the On Playa?
2000, 2001.
Okay.
Maybe just those 2 years.
Okay.
Although I think Eros brought it back later. He actually proposed it to Crimson Rose as our Fire Conclave performance. He wanted to do Flaming Stilt Soccer in the Great Circle for the man burn. And she told him no, she did not like the idea. She thought it was a terrible idea. He was like, no, we can put up like fencing around our section so the ball doesn't get out.
Like the man by kicking the ball into it?
yeah, that was part of it. He's like, we can kick the ball into the man, it'll be awesome. We'll get everyone into it. And she was like, absolutely not. That's the worst idea I've ever heard. Yeah. He was full of ideas though. Eros was. So Flaming Stilt Soccer. So we did some Flaming Stilt Soccer in the comic already. We're going to have round 2 in book 2. And this is really what I'm leading up to is this is all from that 2008 issue, but I'm going to do the Thunderdome in book 2. Wednesday night is Thunderdome. It's Thunderdome and Flaming Stilt Soccer and Battling Dragons all at the same time. That's the finale that I'm basically kind of working up to right now. That's what happens after the Dust Storm on Wednesday afternoon. Wednesday night is this Thunderdome battle where I'm going to have 2 of my campmates, the rabbit and the moose, are going to fight each other in Thunderdome.
Perfect.
Because they're actually based on 2 of my campmates who did battle in Thunderdome. So, and I asked them to pick their own. I was like, what kind of character do you want to be? And they actually picked the rabbit and the moose. So that's what we're going with. So the whole camp's going to go to Thunderdome to watch rabbit and moose battle.
Seems like an unfair matchup.
You think? I don't know.
It's so much bigger than a rabbit.
But a rabbit is...
They're kind of the same size.
All right.
They're totally the same size. The moose is kind of like, he looks like Bullwinkle. And the rabbit is, well, he's the rabbit. He's been in the story for a while. The moose I just introduced recently. So they're going to battle at Thunderdome. And then the Flaming Stilt Soccer rematch kind of lights up right next to the Thunderdome. This is like the chaos of the end of book 2. And the dragons come out to battle. And this is another story from 2000 where all of the dragon art cars met in the middle of the playa to fight each other. And they like drove around. This is following this huge storm. And they like drove around blowing fireballs at each other. And I ended up lighting one of the art cars on fire with my flaming pitchfork.
Oh.
I was supposed to, like they asked me to do it.
Oh, okay.
They were like, the tail's filled with pyro, but we can't get it to light. Like they had been blowing fireballs at the back of the dragon, trying to get the pyro to light, driving in circles. And I'm just running around like an idiot, dressed as this character with the flaming pitchfork, just like, ah!
I want to be in the middle of this dragon battle.
And then
dragons.
The guy started yelling at me. He's like, stab it in the ass. There's pyro in the ass. I was like, what do you mean? He's like, no, just go stab it in the ass, because he couldn't get the thing to light. Anyway, so this is spoilers. I'm kind of giving away the finale to book 2.
Yeah.
But it's all in this old mini comic, so it's not really a spoiler, because anyone who read the old mini comic knows what's coming up.
Right.
So that's what the end of book 2 is going to be. So that brings us to the end of, that's the little mini comic from 2008. And this is what I'm actually trying to, and this is something I was talking to you guys about earlier. I have the first 7 chapters all set up as mini comics. So I want to try to put these out as issues first before we get to the collected hardcover. Okay. I know I'm
so
really...
It's happened.
What's that?
It seems like so much has happened already. Like what possibly more could happen?
In the story?
5 or 6 days.
Well, of course, Saturday is the man burn. That's the big climax of the story. That's the big showdown. Everybody comes together. It's that'll be the big, the showdown between Neptune and Butt-Ra. Butt-Ra is our antagonist. I don't want to get too much into Butt-Ra, but he's the antagonist to Neptune. He's his what do you call him? His nemesis.
Nemesis, yeah.
His nemesis. And so they face off on Saturday. That's when that all comes to a head. Friday night is the opera. Thursday night, I think we're going to do the scavenger hunt. There's also, there's going to be a dark turn in here somewhere because I'm going to have a memorial parade. So a character is not going to make it through the week. Probably not one of the main characters, but I've been to so many memorial parades on the playa for like Fire Conclave members and stuff that I wanted to try to weave that in without getting specific to a person, almost create like a fictional character just to instigate the whole, anyway, I don't want to get too into that.
Right.
And then Sunday is the temple burn. And Sunday will probably be very different. Sunday will be a very,
Meditative.
It'll be meditative. It'll be quiet. It won't be very funny. It'll be like this real kind of spiritual, lots of visuals, but not a lot of texts or jokes or things like that, you know. It'll be a very meditative day that'll just end with the temple burn. And so it's almost like the peak is really book 5 is Saturday night. That's the real peak of the thing. And so then Sunday is kind of the, you know, cooling down after the peak. And then Monday is just the epilogue, prologue. And Friday, Friday's the rock opera. So the first thing, I just have to get through Tuesday, Wednesday, Thursday is the first real big story arc that we're currently right in the middle of. And then also when we get into Friday, like that's when I think each character kind of gets a focus for a book, if that makes sense. Like Tuesday was kind of like Neptune's day. Wednesday is turning into Muncus's day, you know, like where you kind of do a deep dive into a different character. So it's not just hitting the same points over and over. Like we kind of get to spread the attention around. So now we're into the webcomic. So this is now getting into the webcomic. So I organized this just in terms of, I have a bunch of the art installations and much of the art cards, not really getting into the story too much, but I've made a point, as we were talking about before, to try to represent as many of the big art installations as I can, just as almost like set pieces that the story kind of meanders past from time to time.
So to clarify, you have the book comics that really deep dives into each character in each day, and then you have a separate web comic that is more about the art pieces and the structure and less about each character. Is that correct?
They're all the same. They're all the same. So the web comic is basically the print edition in progress.
Okay. You put out like a really 2008.
What's that?
Like you put out like a really shortened
This is
version. Yeah.
This is the first attempt, and it's like 20 pages long. This was the first attempt at a mini comic, and this was basically all of the drawings I had at that point. And this kind of then set up what would become the webcomic, because now I'm kind of considering this canon, you know. And now as we're into Wednesday in the webcomic, you're going to see all the pages from this one are going to get added. They'll be sprinkled throughout, you know, unless they're totally redrawn like the mud wrestling match. But it is like if you look at the webcomic is divided up into chapters. We're on chapter 11. And each chapter for the mini comics, each chapter is one book. And so there's 7 chapters in each day. And then there will be 49, like think of it this way, there's 49 mini comics by the time it's done and 7 collected hardcovers.
Wow.
Wow.
That makes sense? So there's a hardcover for each day of the week. And then each day is divided up into 7 parts. And the days, and this is something that's like I'm in Wednesday now, but it's basically following the same arc as Tuesday. Like it starts with a dream, you know, it kind of builds up. And also you can follow the time of day is important in each chapter because that sets up how the landscape looks. It's really everything.
Man, you have your daytime adventures and you have your nighttime adventures.
Right. And if you look in the comic, like in the middle of the day, everything's very bright and white and kind of washed out. And then as you get into the later afternoon, the sky starts having more and more color in it, more clouds and like shapes in the sky. And then the nighttime is all like, you know, dark and starry skies like this. This stuff is actually much easier to draw than the daytime stuff. So I'm really looking forward to getting back to nighttime.
Wow. I'm just impressed that, you know, it's taken so long and there's so much detail in each day. And I'm just thinking like, when am I going to see the end of Wednesday? When is Thursday? When is this? Do you have your own timeline of like, this has got to be done?
No.
You know, or
there's no timeline because I would be already way behind schedule at this point. Timeline. The goal when I started in 2013, I started the webcomic. My brother was the one who convinced me to do a webcomic. And he said, just commit to 1 page a week. If you can do 1 page a week and you can maintain that rhythm, you'll have, you know, 54 pages at the end of the year, right? Or 52. How many weeks? 52. And he's like, and then just try to keep up the pace. And so I started doing it, and very quickly I got to the point where I could do 2 pages in a week.
Okay.
So I started doing that for a long time. Then I started upping the ante, and towards the end of book 1, I'm doing like 6 to 10 pages a week. Like some of those episodes are like 10 pages long, where I would just really load them up and make them like a lot more full. But since then, you know, some years I'm better, some years I'm not. It depends what else is going on in life if I can keep up. The idea basically is that hopefully at some point I could focus on it full time. Like eventually at some point, if it like, you know, there's enough readership, there's enough demand, I could actually like put everything else aside and just dive in. Because if I could really focus on it, I could do an entire book in a year probably, you know, if that's all I had to do. But you know, we're not there yet, but that's okay. You know, I figure this is a slow burn. This is the marathon, not the sprint.
I like how a lot of these panels, like you're zooming out and it's almost becoming meta. Like you're back to this is
the book. Yeah.
This is a character reading a story of a character within a character.
Yes, exactly. So that's always right on the periphery. Like sometimes we don't talk about it for like, you know, 50 pages at a time. But the book, you're always coming back to that dream room where the two of them are sitting there by the fire. So that book imagery repeats over and over again. And part of it is because, and this is something that I think will be more effective in the print edition, there is this kind of meta experience of holding the book that has the hands holding the book that has, so you're kind of like, you're in the dream and hopefully it kind of will draw you in to the experience.
Like the never-ending story.
Yeah. It is actually a never-ending story. This is the real never-ending story.
So these are quite a few. And so like a lot of these, like, you know, this is Soma by the Flaming Lotus Girls. But you can see the characters riding by on the bicycles back here. Like there's Neptune with the little fish. And so sometimes it's just they're riding bikes from place to place and they kind of go past these art installations. And so it's all kind of woven in. Or this one, the Steampunk Treehouse. And then long term, oh, this one I didn't realize this image is not finished. This is
ooh, we got a little sneak peek of an unfinished image here, is what you're saying.
Or like this was finished a year ago, but this file is not the final version because you can still see the pencil lines and everything. I didn't realize that before I did it. So then long term, if you want to get into really long term, so, you know, God willing, someday I finish all 7 books, right? And I do the entire week. Everything gets revealed in book 7. Like there's a lot of secrets that come out in book 7 that I'm kind of sitting on. That's partly what's driving me to get there, is because I want to reveal the whole thing. But it gets to the end. So now you have one entire week and it's all focused on Camp Sucky Fucky and Neptune and Munkus and Zoe Trope. And those are our main characters. And then the idea is that potentially there could be a whole nother series that would start up after that, just focusing on different characters. You could go to a whole nother camp and have a different main character and go through the same week. And maybe you even run into the other characters along the way. Like maybe Neptune is there, maybe Munkus is there, but now they have become secondary characters. And there's this new week. Now, is it a new week or are we going through the same week again, but focusing on other characters?
Wow.
You know, like, and so you could potentially, it could, and that becomes more of an issue because I've kind of set it up so that it could be adapted into a series or a film, for film or television, where you could actually do a series where each season would be a week and then the next season would be a whole nother week, but kind of with a different set of characters in the same world, right? So you might say you were in series 2 focusing on some other total group of characters, also true stories. It has to be all true stories, right? But then you might intersect with these characters at a point in book 1. Do you know what I mean? Where it's not really a new week. It's the same week going on at the same time, but now you're just in a different camp. So you might get to the burn on Saturday and look, there's like Garnish and Neptune and Munkus. Like, and you're kind of weaving right back into book 1. So that's the idea for potentially adapting it, is that either as a series, it could be It could be each season is a week, or it could be a film where a single film is the whole week. There's different ways to kind of divide it up.
Yeah, I was just thinking this would be such a beautiful animation.
That I think animation is really the way to go. Originally, I was picturing it as some kind of like hybrid Marvel Cinematic Universe kind of thing, but I honestly, I think the animation would make more sense.
Right.
When you think about it.
And for those people who haven't seen you work, like, you don't create this in Procreate or like Photoshop.
No, these are all hand drawn. I draw them by hand, just pencil and ink, and then I do scan them. I take them into Photoshop, and I kind of do all the cleanup in Photoshop. There's a lot of going in and making little changes, sometimes changing the text. There is a whole digital element to the process, but primarily it's all drawn by hand, the old-fashioned way. Like for something like this, when there's a lot of text, that takes a lot of time. And so, in the digital stage of this, not only was I cleaning up the drawing, I was going in and really cleaning up the text and spacing it right, and like stuff that's kind of tricky to do by hand.
Readable, right?
What's that?
Making it readable.
Making it readable, right? Because in the original drawing, these letters are really small, and so sometimes when you scan them, they look kind of, not so great. So I have to go in and clean it all up.
Mm.
Boots and cats and boots and cats.
Boots and cats. Boots and cats.
Yeah.
Cats. Boots and cats. Boots and cats. Boots and cats.
Perfect.
My favorite things, boots and cats.
There's the disco fish, one of my all-time favorite cars, the disco fish. Yeah, I try to like include all of my favorites. Here's La Contessa. Another one, I did a bunch with La Contessa. La Contessa chasing the whale out past the trash fence. That's a true story.
They broke past the trash fence barrier?
Oh yeah, Munkus and I were on La Contessa, and we're driving out it's late afternoon. And the La Contessa ran into the white whale, like not literally ran into him, they just came up on each other. And then everyone on the La Contessa is like, get the whale, get the whale. So they start chasing the whale. The whale breaks through the trash fence. Next thing you know, we're like a mile outside of the city, just like cruising at like 50 miles an hour across the desert with the ship chasing the whale. And it took us like a couple hours to get back. It was really something.
Wow.
So that's all a true story too. I think they got in a lot of trouble for that.
Yeah, I've never heard of anyone else breaking the trash fence. I mean, I've heard of people trying to get in from the other way, but
this was
breaking out.
I think this was 2002. This was that first year of La Contessa.
You guys could drive to Gerlach.
Yeah, right. But we had no idea. We had just like wandered onto the ship, so we were kind of just held hostage for several hours while they chased the whale all around.
It's very convenient that these shenanigans keep happening and you just happen to be there.
Yeah, what the heck?
I don't know about that. I think that I'm only experiencing the smallest sliver of shenanigans. Like the amount of actual shenanigans are way beyond any of this. Like I've just been lucky to be there for a few funny little moments. Here's the land shark.
Yeah.
So yeah, just a bunch of art cars, the snail car. There's the duck. I always like putting the duck in. That's one of my favorite cars to use.
Mm-hmm.
The lantern fish. Oh, and the walking beast, one of my favorites.
Oh yeah. Our friend Martin.
Yeah. I remember, I think it was you and Jamie took me over there. We got to ride on it. That was really fun.
Yeah, it's great. It's such a great experience.
It's such a...
Shake the earth as you walk.
It's like a military vehicle.
Yeah.
Great design. And then also camps. I've kind of focused on a few camps. Obviously, the first one is Camp Sucky Fucky, which has shown up quite a few times.
Right.
And there's the Mystical Misfits back there in the distance, and Jamie's little train car.
Yeah.
This is really, and this is the design I've settled on. It's basically the 2008 camp design that has become the default design in the comic. It's kind of my favorite design. I like the saloon more than I like the later modern versions. There's something just real rustic and fun about this design that I always like. I like the stage with the box and everything.
Oh, but I will say the aerial rig that you have here is far more sturdy than the one we created. This a massive upgrade.
I think this is the later generation aerial rig with the early generation saloon, if you know what I mean. Like, 'cause the later aerial rigs were much better, but you're right. The first couple of years they were pretty shoddy. Let's see what else. Oh, this is Soren's character. He does have a character. You always see when the ponytail and the goatee, you know you're dealing with Soren.
Yep.
And Mason is always the guy with the megaphone, basically. And then other camps, like a district last year. It just happened to do this for their 10-year anniversary. I didn't even realize it till the drawing was done. And they emailed me. They're like, "It's so great you did this for our 10-year anniversary." I was like, "Oh, really?"
Oh.
That was the plan all along. Yeah. And the deep end. So I like to kind of do specific camps also, if possible. To try to kind of pull in as many different people as possible. This was a camp that I don't know what the name of this camp was. It didn't look exactly like this, but it had this giant lion with a DJ booth under it. And we went and did a show there. But God, it was like 2001. And so I used that camp, even though I don't even know what the name of it was, and it didn't really look like this. I just remembered that lion, so I tried to kind of recreate that.
Send us an email if you know.
Yeah, if you know what the lion camp is, reach out. Let us know. I'd love to hear about it. And then more adventures from the lion camp. There's Germany's. This is obviously Germany. Your character with your flaming skirt and giant fireballs.
Oh, amazing. Also fashioned out of the skirt was a bicycle chain because it had the rigidity, and then just some hardware store rods that would go in, and there was a washer on the back. It was real janky, but we used to, make our fire tools from the craft store or from the hardware store, There wasn't any way there was no wholesalers of these things. So these were all just, well, will this work? I think it'll work.
The worst that can happen.
Right.
Our first poi that we made back in the 90s, we didn't even have Kevlar. They were just towels wrapped up in wire.
Oh!
And so they start like ash would start coming out and stuff, and so them would fall out. Dr. Megavolt, of course. I'm just endlessly fascinated by Dr. Megavolt.
Nice.
Bunch of fire spinners. And I really like drawing the fire spinners. I've always loved the patterns made by the fire, so I think they translate really nicely to comic.
Right.
And Larry, or drawing for Larry.
That's great. Great. Do you have any other questions or thoughts?
No, this is honestly so epic.
Yeah. This is a great dive into the history. A lot of people don't know or wouldn't really be able to relate to, but it's so deep into all of these stories and events, and I don't know, I feel like I just opened up a Burning Man history book.
Yeah.
Even
some of the best art, and just the
really
whole
great
experience of what it's like to be there.
Yeah.
For the first time, and to see all this stuff, and to have your day adventures, and to get defeated and drink some more water and go out at night to fight again. That's much more true for like the average person going out there. You're actually having an adventure and a story. You're not thinking about, the festival and how it was organized, and that's not what you're thinking. You're falling in love, you're getting your heart broken, you're making friends, building things,
mud wrestling,
all of that. Fighting dragons, building things and having it fall apart. I mean, there's a reason people keep coming back. It's because it's like, a guaranteed adventure.
Guaranteed adventure.
Yeah. That's great. Cool. Would you, put it back on that, and we'll do kind of like a ending conclusion. To recap, this is David Campbell Wilson is the full name. I'm Jenna Germany, and
Aimee
Nicole over here.
And it's Drinkwater Comic at
drinkwatercomic.com.
Drinkwatercomic.com. That's where you find all the juicy details and really can immerse yourself in until this actually gets out in print, and then I don't know what's going to happen. I can't wait for t-shirts and hats to come out. So that's another donor idea. I just came to me like, someone please make me a t-shirt. Thank you all for joining us for Campfire Cove, little digital world series. It's been really excellent. And thank you again.
Enjoy. Thank you all so much. Thanks, guys.
I just, yeah, this is rad.